everyone, it's Sevi. Whether you're a gullible customer or a Dot fan, Sampo's your guy. And with Kafka's arrival, he's definitely going to get more fans. In this guide, we'll go through Sampo's kit, traces, Eidolons, Relic Builds, Litecoin's gameplay tips, and team synergies to help maximize his Dot potential. Before we start, I've also got a video that discusses many fundamental aspects of Dot or damage over time. So if you're not that well acquainted with Dots yet, I recommend checking that video out first or afterwards. With that, let's get this Sampo guide going.
Me? I'm just an easygoing fella that looks out for the little guy. Free of charge, I might add.
Sampo's talent is the core of his Dot application. It makes all his attack hits have a 65% base chance to apply a stack of Wind Shear, which lasts for 3 turns by default, and 4 when you unlock his Ascension 2 ability. This Wind Shear can stack up to 5 times for more damage. Note that every attack hit has a chance to apply the Wind Shear, so for example, if I use his basic attack which does 3 hits, it's possible to apply 3 stacks already. Of course, that's still subject to effect hit rate and resistance modifiers. Reapplying a stack also refreshes the max duration of all the stacks. With these properties, Sampo can easily maintain max Wind Shear stacks on his enemies, especially in single target scenarios. Next, Sampo's skill deals 5 hits of wind damage that randomly bounce between enemies. Each hit deals equal wind damage, but the second and onward hits reduce less toughness than the first. With its multi-target nature, the damage and application are more subject to RNG against mobs. However, in a single target scenario, one enemy takes all the hits, which is really effective to help break wind weakness and stack Wind Shear fast. Not to mention, it's a satisfying sound and sight. Sampo's ultimate then deals 4 hits of wind damage to all enemies with a 100% base chance to apply a Dot vulnerability debuff for 2 turns. This is what makes Sampo a vital unit in Dot teams, as he can amplify everyone's Dots. The ultimate costs 120 energy though, so depending on your recharging time and enemy speed, there can be downtimes with applying this. I'll discuss more later about managing his rotation and ultimate recharge time. As for Sampo's technique, he throws a bomb to blind enemies in an area for 10 seconds so they won't get alerted. If you initiate battle while they're blinded, that will delay the enemy's first action by 25%, which can help you apply your team's debuffs before the enemies take their turn. For his Ascension abilities, A2 extends his Wind Shear duration by 1 turn. He can already refresh the stacks in his single target scenarios easily, so the extension isn't as impactful, but this could help more in multi-target scenarios where it's harder to refresh stacks. A4 makes his ultimate regenerate an added 10 energy, which is great for helping with his ult recharge time. And A6 makes enemies deal 15% less damage to him if they have a Wind Shear effect. This is solely for survivability purposes. For the minor stat bonus traces, he gets EHR and attack, which are important for application reliability and damage output, and the effect resistance is nice as well to help prevent debuffs. While Sampo's kit at E0 is already very cohesive, his Eidolons have very good effects that improve mostly his Dot capabilities. E1 gives his skill an extra bounce hit, which has various benefits. That's another chance to apply Wind Shear, it results in a bit more skill damage and toughness reduction, and the extra hit actually generates 6 more energy, which helps with faster ult recharge. With E2, when an enemy with Wind Shear is defeated, then all other enemies will be inflicted with 1 Wind Shear stack. This only gets value in multi-target scenarios with easy-to-kill enemies, but becomes irrelevant in single-target elite or boss fights. E3 increases his skill and basic attack levels. E4 allows each skill hit to immediately detonate 8% of currently applied Wind Shear damage on enemies, whether from normal or break Dots. It's sort of like Kafka's skill, but exclusive for Wind Shear. This becomes particularly amazing in single target scenarios since all 6 hits of the skill will result in 48% extra damage dealt. You have more incentive to use his skill, but that does make him more SP hungry, so it's up to you. If you want to better maximize this Eidolon, you can adjust your team rotations to trigger this more often. E5 increases his ultimate and talent levels, and E6 gives his talent Wind Shear a 15% damage multiplier increase, a simple but great unconditional damage boost for his Dot. All in all, his Eidolons all give amazing improvements, and if you are pulling him in his rate up under Kafka's banner, hopefully you'll have good luck in pulling his duplicates too. Moving on, let's go over Sampo's relic stats and set recommendations. I'll discuss his standard build recommendation, then go over some considerations about building crit and break effect. Let's establish his effect hit rate target first, which is important for reliable application. Again, his talent Wind Shear has a 65% base chance, while his ultimate has 100%, but those will still be affected by the enemy's effect resistance. If you want him to have reliable reliable application against elite or boss enemies with up to 40% effect resistance. 67% is the max goal to make his ultimate have a 100% real chance of applying. That will end up making his skill have a 65% real chance, but that's not a big issue since his multi-hitting abilities give him a lot of proc chances anyway. However, if you aim for lower EHR or have trouble getting higher, I'd recommend at least about 40% EHR as a baseline. That puts a bit more risk of missing applications up against high resistance enemies, but it's still somewhat manageable. Of course, get more EHR if you don't want to risk that. Now onto the recommended main and sub stats. For his body piece, you can go for either attack or EHR depending on how much EHR you're lacking. If you already have ample EHR from his traces, relic substats, light cone, and or planar set bonus, then attack percent is recommended for better damage. However, if you're sorely in need of EHR stats, then EHR is better. Then for his feat, you can go with either speed or attack percent. Speed is generally more preferable for helping hit higher breakpoints and cycling his turns faster, but attack can still be viable, especially if you can compensate speed through other sources like substats or buffs. Keep your speed and attack pieces so you can tune him and see which works best for you. For his planar sphere, wind damage boost is generally the best to increase his raw damage and wind shear dot, with attack as an okay but generally less optimal alternative. Then for the link rope, you can go for attack, ERR, or break effect. Attack is a straightforward consistent boost for his dot and non-dot damage sources, while break effect is for a higher break dot, with some considerations I'll discuss in a bit. Meanwhile, an ERR rope can allow him to shorten his ult recharge rotations by 1 turn, which helps in maintaining the dot vulnerability debuff uptime, especially against fast enemies. A question that might arise is if Sampo wants crit stats, especially since dots do not crit. To that, consider these following points. 1. Crit is a nice substat to get. It's still going to help his regular attacks deal more damage. However, in a perfect world, we'd get a lot of crit rolls along with the other important stats, but RNG is a pain in the ass, and that's resources that could have been spent elsewhere. 2. You're already juggling attack, speed, and EHR stats. Chasing after crit stats to get a decent crit baseline will be quite difficult without sacrificing these other stats, unless your luck is just that good. And 3. Attack affects both his regular damage and dots, but crit is only for regular damage. Since Kafka now brings the ability to detonate dots, attack gains even more value, so Sampo's wind shear can do stronger repeated detonations. Basically, I wouldn't advise using a crit body piece, and although it's a nice substat to roll for, I recommend treating crit as a lower priority stat for Sampo. Another possible route is building Sampo for break effect stats, like by replacing his rope with break effect, finding break effect substats, or using the thief set bonuses. When you have his E4, which can detonate wind shear breaks, that makes break effect more potent. But as always, break effect relies on breaking with that specific unit at a consistent rate. Sampo has fairly good innate breaking capabilities thanks to his AoE ultimate and bouncing skill attack, but the ease and difficulty can vary depending on the combat scenario and your gameplay skill. Break effect is still an okay substat to roll. If you do want to maximize Sampo's break, just be more mindful of tracking enemy toughness and timing his attacks. So for substats, your priorities are EHR as needed, attack, and speed. After that, crit or break effect rolls are nice additions depending on your preference and luck. Effect resistance rolls are also welcome to help prevent CC debuffs. As for his relic sets, the most flexible and competitive route is to go for 2-piece combos of wind damage, attack, speed, and break effect. This has a lot of room for mixing pieces with the best substats rather than forcing less optimal 4-piece sets. Among the 4-piece sets, you have the option for going for the Eagle set, which lets him advance forward upon using his ultimate. There's the Musketeer set for the attack and speed bonuses, or the Thief set if you're aiming for a break build. At the end of the day, it's mostly about finding the right main stats and better substat pieces. That depends mostly on your relic luck and which caverns are more efficient to farm for you. Then for the planar sets, I have 3 top recommendations. First is the Space Sealing Station, which gives a straightforward 24% attack bonus once you reach 120 speed. Second is the Pan-Galactic. It gives 10% EHR and an attack bonus that scales on the user's EHR. If you get at least 50% EHR, that's a 12% or more attack bonus. It's very close versus the Space Sealing set, and substat quality is a huge consideration. But since the Space Sealing Station is in World 3 with a fleet of the Ageless, that's a more efficient world to farm in my opinion. Third, it's actually Fleet of the Ageless. While it looks less optimal at first since it only gives the user 8% attack, you're at least buffing other allies' attack, like Kafka or Luca, who still make use of the attack buff, which will help balance out Sampo's personal damage loss. Note as well that this can stack from multiple users. If you actually happen to farm a good set in World 3 while trying to farm the space ceiling station, the fleet is a decent alternative. Other less recommended but situationally viable options are the following. The Talia set is for maximizing a break effect build, but note that it has a much higher speed requirement to unlock the second bonus. Then the Sprightly Von Wax Advance Forward can help make him start stacking his wind shear sooner. The 5% ERR could help shorten his ult recharge by 1 turn at E0 with a basic skill neutral rotation, but otherwise it's not much of a help. Now let's go through Sampo's light cone recommendations. Your free-to-play 4-star option, and a pretty good one at that, is Fermata, which you can easily get a copy and superimpositions of from the Forgotten Hall shop. It gives a break effect bonus, and more importantly, a damage increase when attacking an enemy with a shock or wind shear debuff, which is very easy to maintain with Sampo, Kafka, or Serval. Your top 4-star gacha options are either Eyes of the Prey or Good Night and Sleep Well. Eyes of the Prey gives a lot of effect hit rate to help with his EHR needs, thereby allowing more relic stat flexibility, and the dot bonus has clear kit synergy. On the other hand, Good Night and Sleep Well gives a universal damage bonus which affects both regular damage and dots that can stack up to 3 times for every debuff on the enemy, which will be easy to maintain in dot teams. At max superimposition, this becomes a crazy 72% damage bonus. Eyes of the Prey has good value if you still need a lot of EHR with a solid dot increase, but if you can fulfill his EHR needs through his relic stats anyway, Good Night offers better damage potential, and at high superimpositions, it's generally his best option. Whilst Light Cone in the Name of the World is still a viable option with some limitations. It has high base stats as a 5-star and gives a damage increase against debuff enemies. Unfortunately, its EHR and attack bonus only applies for the skill attack. For less recommended but honorable mentions, the free Silver Wolf event Light Cone is fine to give Sampo a ton of EHR and extra energy generation with a defense debuffer on the team. And the Resolution Shines Light Cone gives him defense reduction utility for your entire team to take advantage of at the cost of lower personal damage. Now, when it comes to Sampo's rotations, he can assume a rotation that incorporates frequent basic attacks to either result in an SP neutral consumption or even be SP positive to help with SP economy. Since basic attack hits can stack and refresh the wind shear, this will still maintain the dot uptime effectively. Of course, less skill attacks means less wind toughness damage, lower damage potential, and lower energy generation. If you also have Sampo's E4, which requires the skill attack to trigger the effect, basic attacks won't let you maximize that. On the other hand, a skill-heavy rotation deals maximum damage and toughness reduction, regenerates energy faster, and triggers more E4 procs. Of course, the big disadvantage is that this makes Sampo SP hungry, and depending on your teammates, that might cause you to have trouble with SP management. You'll need SP positive teammates to enable this playstyle. Ultimately, Sampo is quite flexible enough to adapt to whatever your combat situation currently needs. Experiencing him in specific teams and battles will help you get a sense of how to best balance his skill and basic attack usage. Then for his ultimate recharge time, Sampo can have either 3 or 4 turn rotations depending on your skill usage, if E1 is unlocked, if he has ERR, and other external energy sources. Faster recharge times will be more skill point hungry though, since you want the added energy generation of his skill, especially with E1 unlocked. But if you do a skill and 4 basic rotation without any buffs or external energy sources, then that will result in a very long 5-turn rotation. Finally, let's discuss Sampo's team synergies. A standard dot template for Sampo comps him with at least another dot unit whose dots Sampo will amplify, plus a survival unit. The 4th flex slot can depend on your preference. You could include another dot unit who might offer extra utilities. Certain Harmony or Nihility units can help amplify your damage through various buffs or debuffs. If you want the most comfort, another survival unit will help. For dot teammates, your top options are of course Kafka, Luca, and Serval. Kafka's dot detonation ability synergizes perfectly with Sampo's dot vulnerability debuff and stackable wind shear. They're going to be a very common pairing for sure. Before Kafka, Serval was the staple lightning dot unit to pair with Sampo. Luca applies bleed and inflicts a damage vulnerability on enemies, which affects both non-dot and dot damage sources and stacks with Sampo's dot vulnerability. Now, when it comes to Harmony units, Asta is a top general pick thanks to her team-wide attack and speed buffs that dot units appreciate a lot. She's also an effective fire breaker and is even able to apply a burn dot via her basic attack. Bronya's skill is single target oriented but has particularly interesting potential with a Sampo Kafka combo to increase the frequency of Kafka's skill detonation. At least her ult has a team-wide buff. Tingyan has strong buffs and a useful battery ult, but they're single target focused. She won't be as maximized in a dot team with multiple damage dealers. Yukong is another team-wide attack buffer and she also gives crit buffs. However, her buff timing and speed tuning mechanics can be tricky to properly utilize in a dot team. So out of our current 4 Harmony supports, Asta is highly recommended for her easy-to-use, strong team-wide buffs. And she's already free. As for Nihility units, Silverwolf is an easy top recommendation. Her weakness implant opens new breaking opportunities, and she has resistance and defense debuffs which amplify both dot and non-dot sources among her other debuffs. Meanwhile, Pella's ult targets all enemies for a defense debuff, which is great against AoE scenarios. Her buff removal can be situationally helpful against certain enemies, and her EHR team buff helps your dot units. Welt doesn't have any dot application, but he can slow and delay enemy turns as well as increase their damage vulnerability. As for survival units, Gepard, March, and Fire MC will all do the job with protection and aggro manipulation, though Gepard provides the most comfort. You can even give them the ability to apply burn by equipping the Universal Market Light Cone. All available abundance units will pretty much do the job too, though they have varying degrees of healing potential and extra utility. Finally, you could always try using Sampo in non-dot teams. It won't utilize his dot focus kit as much as possible, but if it works for you, then it works. He's probably going to be there to help break wind-weak enemies as quickly as possible. And if you're really feeling daring, you could try slotting him into a hyper carry team template. Feel free to f around and find out. I'm sure Sampo does a lot of that anyway. And that's it for this sample guide. Whether you're prepping him for your Kafka team or just one of his very willing customers, let me know in the comments what you think of him so far. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already, and I will see you all soon. Take care!